While their time in Platteville is now coming to an end, the discussion about fall camp is just beginning. What are the new sources of optimism, and what is giving us new cause for concern? I'm Rajeev. He's Justin. Here we go.
Welcome to the Bucky Report, your destination for all things Wisconsin Badgers. Authentic takes.
Oh my God.
Game analysis.
Touchdown Badgers! Ring one up!
And discussion from the fan perspective.
Woo-hoo!
Thanks for joining us and on Wisconsin.
Welcome to the Bucky Report. We are your hosts, Rajeev and Justin, back together on a Sunday evening to talk about all things Wisconsin Badgers. We did have a 1 week break, by the way. Sorry about that last week. I had some vacations. Yeah. It's been 2 weeks since our show. A little bit of a break pre-football season. On today's show, the Badgers have spent the last 2 weeks in Platteville at fall camp. We go over what happened at camp and do a positional stock up, stock down, each highlighting one player per position. Now that we've seen this group at least practice together, do we feel any different about our floor and ceiling predictions for this team in 2024? The Know Your Foe series continues as we skip ahead in the schedule a bit to highlight Penn State, a game Justin and I will both be in attendance for. And as always, we'll take live listener questions. We are at the Bucky Report on Twitter, YouTube, and wherever you can find your podcast. If you like what we're doing, hit the subscribe button so you know when we make new content. We know a lot of you watch this that are subscribed. Thank you so much for that. If you're checking it out and you're not subscribed, if you like it, hit it so that as we get into football season, we can join the community and talk to us a lot more. Sorry about the skipped week. I was on vacation with my family in Chicago. It was great, by the way, but yeah, it was weird. All of a sudden, fall camp started and then we just didn't have a show last week. But the good news is now we can talk about fall camp today. And of course, our season is so close. If you're looking at the cover of the show, and you see that we're doing Penn State today. No, you didn't miss the other shows. I was just in my head thinking that Penn State was our game after USC. I don't know why. I could have just looked it up. And we're doing, there you go, Neza. We're doing Penn State today, and then we're going to circle back and do Purdue and Rutgers and Northwestern. We'll cover all the teams soon, and maybe even into the start of the year. Justin, how are you, my friend? I'm so jealous because you actually got a chance to go to the open practice yesterday in Platteville. I live in Vegas. That was difficult. Tell us all, first of all, how are you? And tell us all about yesterday's experience.
I am good. It was an interesting experience. There is so much going on that it's almost like a overload to the senses, trying to pay attention to everything that's happening. Ryan was very right when he said that it's something a little crazy kind of being there, trying to stay on top of everything. My gut instinct after watching it, I'll say this. If you went to the practice, anyone who came out of it saying that you could take a lot away from like what the team's going to look like on the field this year, I don't think you can really say it. Because like even when you watch the situational stuff that they were doing and things like that, I'm like, this doesn't really feel like real football. Like it doesn't feel like it's like there's no flow to it like there is in a real game. So you're watching it and you're trying to see guys show the tools, but you're not really seeing something where you're like, I wasn't taking a lot away from it if a quarterback hit a big throw. And I was like, that's going to carry over. It's more like, okay, I like knowing that throw is in his bag, like he can make that play. But I can't really take anything away from this about what type of coverage or anything that they're really trying to do here. A lot of it was 7-on-7. So there's only so much you can take away from it.
Yeah, so if you're not familiar, of course, there was no spring game this year, as you guys all know. There was no launch like there was last year because of the renovations happening at Camp Randall Stadium. So when they're in Platteville this week, they opened it up for the public yesterday. So, Justin, how many people would you say were there at the practice yesterday?
It's a good question. I would say there were at least several hundred. I would say 500 people, maybe.
Okay.
It was a pretty good crowd.
Nice. Yes, Daltrees is better than launch last year. Well, it's a little different.
It absolutely was. Yeah. The quality of play was significantly better than what we saw, especially from the quarterbacks. I don't think anybody like lit it up, but there were some nice takeaways, some things you could do. One of the things I will say coming away from this is people were asking me about it. They were questioning why Tretch wasn't on the field more. And I was just like, they know what they have in him. Like, he was the one guy that I watched when they did the receiver drills. I'm like, he flashes every single time. Like, he just chews people up. You don't have to get him out there and see him because he'll just go out there and do it. Like, he's good what he's going to do when he gets on the field. They have a bunch of other guys that they're trying to figure out how they fit. Not necessarily so with Tretch.
Man, Tretch is really good. He's just going to be really good. It's so fun. I think it's great. We'll talk about them. We'll talk about him when we get to receiver. So what we're going to do, guys, we're going to go a positional. We're going to talk about alter positions and talk about stock up, stock down. What are we feeling after reading all the reports? Justin actually got to see a practice. I haven't seen anything live, but I have read almost everything that's been released. So we're going to talk about kind of where we are on the position and then highlight one player that you want to talk about, whether that the player that's maybe driving your thoughts up on stock or stock down for that matter, kind of someone that sort of struck you in fall camp. So let's start on the defensive side of the ball. We generally start on offense, but we're going to start on the defensive side of the ball. We'll start defensive line first, Justin. Are you stock up? Are you stock down on D line? And give me a player that you want to talk about on the
Sure. Let's do parameters on this. Are we talking in comparison to last season, or where we thought they would be just based off of this?
Where I think from pre-camp to post-camp.
Okay, that's fair. Defensive line, I would say stock up, and I would say Brandon Lane is the one that's the clear. He's the guy that is the linchpin of this. I think that he's going to force himself into first team snaps with certain situations where they play a run heavy team. He's absolutely going to be the guy. It's probably actually out there starting. I will say Curtis Neal looks good. He moves really well for a big boy. I think the defensive line is going to surprise people a little bit this year. I think it's not going to be necessarily a weakness. It may not be the perfect scenario for when we're playing against the top level teams, but I do think that they're capable.
Yeah. So the funny thing is I had stock up Brandon Lane written down, just the same thing, because I mean, it's nice to hear a name that we weren't expecting to really show out, be the guy. And I think that's great. I'm getting a couple of questions here. Badger Vorma says, is that a Falk jersey? No, it's not a Falk jersey. This is a Jonathan Taylor jersey. But as you know, I'm a Colts fan. I will say this. I wanted to bring this up on the show. The Colts had their first preseason game today, and Tanner Bortolini got a lot of snaps at center. And let me tell you guys, the snaps were looking good. Clearly, he has been getting a lot
sandbagging with us.
He's been getting a lot of teachings and learnings on the snap. They were crisp. They were clean. He played really well. I thought he looked really good out there. So that's that. But yes, I wore my Colts jersey all day when the Colts play. So, but yeah, listen, I think it's still the question mark, obviously, Justin. Like, defensive line is not something that we're super excited about, but it's nice to see some guys kind of showing out a little bit, which is really good. Okay, linebackers. I'm going to take this one first. I'm going to say stock down. And not necessarily like we heard some stuff today that they played really well. The defense played well, but just in general, when I looked at all of it, Nick Osen put some great notes out there. You can read Nick stuff. You can read Evan stuff. You can read all the other sites. I didn't see a ton about like guys really shining and Pius and Allegro and Chaney. I felt like Peterson. There were some notes here and there, but we also know that their offense ran the ball really well, which is great. That's a good thing to have. Do I think the linebackers are going to be bad? No, I think they're going to be great. But I have to just say a little bit of stock that I didn't really hear much about Leon Lowry, didn't really hear much about Jake Chaney. And I kind of expected for those guys to kind of take over. Now, again, these are just secondhand reports of what people are seeing at practice. Unless you saw anything when you were there yesterday, I'm a little bit down on these guys. I'm going to be clear. I love this unit. But from where I was pre-camp to now, I just wish I would have heard more.
So when they went live yesterday, I initially had similar thoughts before seeing them yesterday and then hearing today. I'm kind of in a push situation, I think, overall, but they really came out. Yesterday, they were impressive. The linebackers made plays yesterday.
Good.
And that was one of the things that I was concerned about because it didn't sound like we were hearing a lot about them. And it seems like that they really came on in the practice yesterday. Maybe they did. I know they did a little more blitzing and stuff like that. It sounds like they wreaked havoc today. So I honestly think we're going to be okay with them. I think that they're going to be playmakers. I don't know if we necessarily have anyone that we're going to look at and say this guy's a bona fide star, but I think that they'll be an above average unit in the Big Ten, which that could make them very, very good.
And just think about what they were like from last year.
Last year, they were a below average unit as a Big Ten.
Dodgers just stock down from last year, though? Absolutely not. Stock is way up from last year.
Yeah, if we're going by that, it's night and day. Like the level of athleticism that's been infused in that room. Let's put it this way. Sebastian Cheeks yesterday, he was flashing, and he's not probably going to see the field this year. Like if he's going to be in, it's going to be probably minimal reps for a guy from the inside. And I think that he has all the talent in the world to be a really good inside linebacker for us down the road.
Yeah, it's great to see. Thanks for all of you, by the way, joining us live. We've got almost 100 of you joining us right now. A couple comments here. Jeffrey Dominator asks, who would you say is the fastest player on the team? I think it's actually Will Pauling. That's been was that the recent release that they had over the summer? Is it still Pauling?
He was the spring. He was the top guy in terms of the overall. I think Burrows. I think Quincy Burrows had
I think you're right.
Fastest one. He was 22. Over 22. It's hard to say who the fastest is because I don't know the distance that they're doing, and if we don't know what are we saying that in regards to? Is it 20 yards? Is it 40?
Right.
Tretch is one of the fastest guys for short area. Like he was on that list like 2 or 3 times. Pauling was on the list every time. Some of those guys are just they take a second to get up to speed. So I don't really know. That's a tough question to answer. It might right now. It might be Xavier Lucas might be in the ballpark on that too. Like that kid can fly. So there's the speed has really gone up. Like it's not an easy answer anymore.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Tyler Schreiber asked, do I take Richardson in fantasy or no, Rajeev? No, I haven't seen anything that you want to take him. Listen, I'm all about my Colts, but boy, I'm not there yet with him. Yeah. Really, really not. Ryan puts up here, and I wanted to ask you about this too. Garrison Soliday had a comment on Nick's notebook today. Ryan says, Urlacher Soliday today. What are your thoughts on it? I mean, could a tiny little star being born, just something that could show out a little bit?
The other day, like a little bit here and there, but like he's not a guy that I've paid that much attention to, just because it's been such a deep room for the linebackers that it's like, okay, he's on the roster. So I don't want to like say that I know all this stuff about him when I don't really have much insight. Like I think he's a walk-on. I don't really know too much about him.
What I like is that there's a name that we don't really talk about or know about that's making plays, which I like to see. I mean, that's great because we need more of that. Nessa, this Ryan Herring's guy should get into podcasting. Yes, he should. All right, Justin, let's move to the cornerbacks. Where are you on cornerbacks? Stock up or stock down? And give me a player.
I think I'm actually stock up. I think that at times this secondary unit can be flat out dominant. They're going to make people very uncomfortable. Forkering is a dude this year.
Yeah, he is.
I think Rico and him are going to be a very, very tough combo at cornerback. I think that he's the guy that I would mention right now. I think he's made a massive jump from where he was last year, and that's a big deal for this team. If you have 2 guys that can really stick it to a wide receiver group, and Laffey is a great let's put it this way. People were asking me about Tretch, and I'm like, Laffey's good. And he can't handle Pauling and Tretch, but that tells you how good Pauling and Tretch are. Like, they're going to be a problem for every team we play, and I'm not excluding Bama or Oregon against them. I think that they can make plays against those 2 teams. It's just going to be whether they can do it consistently enough.
Stop the presses, everyone. We talked about cornerbacks, and Justin brought up Nysier Forkeren. He loves Nysier Forkeren. But listen, that's good. I also have stock up. The name I wrote down is, you mentioned him, Max Lofi, to me, is climbing up that depth chart. He's going to be that third guy, which is fine. But we've talked a lot about cornerbacks as far as depth, and we don't really have it. Ryan Herrings has talked a lot about this as well. And we've got to build some of these younger guys. And we've heard some things about Jonas DeCluna as well, having a decent camp. Snowden has had some snaps at corner, which is great, which I love to see. But Max Lofi looks like he could be really a dude. And now if you're talking about 3 bona fide corners in Rico, Forkeren, and Lofi, in addition to the secondary, the safeties that we have in the secondary, I mean, we're looking pretty good. That is certainly a unit. So I agree, stock up there.
I will push back a little bit on that, though. I think there is good depth at corner. It might be one of the deeper units on the team. I think they feel good about Delancey and DeClona are both guys that I think they're comfortable with, and I think Austin Brown can come down in the slot if Laffey goes off. And
My thinking is this. Okay, so Delancey, obviously new guy coming in. DeClona, we didn't really see much of him last year, and when we did, I wasn't overly impressed with what I saw last year.
He's not ready to be
right.
He's not a shutdown guy. He's got some work to do.
For sure. He needs to make a jump. I guess what I'm saying is if Hallman and Forkerin were to go out, you'd be pretty worried. Now you were prepared with any starting unit that go out. That's a big deal. But I feel like we don't really have like the shutdown guys that can come in there and I'm super
nobody.
There are positions like running back, receiver. There are positions that I'm feeling comfortable if you go into the 2 deep. I don't really feel that excited about the 2 deep at quarterback.
Well, see, here's what I'll say on that. I'm not worried about any of these guys going in. If Delancey or DeClona ends up having to come in and play, I'm confident that they can go out there and provide quality reps. Will they be difference makers? No, they're probably not going to be difference makers, but I'm not sure that they're necessarily going to be guys that get carved up, which is what when I look at depth, if you have secondary guys that can come in and they're not going to be a problem out there, you're in a good spot. And honestly, I don't think Wisconsin's had that luxury in a long, long time for that level of depth at that position. Has there been a year where we could lose a starter and we're like, all right, we're fine? We're lucky to have one good corner a lot of years.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, listen, the secondary is in really good shape, and we'll go on to safeties now. I'll start with this one for me. Again, stock up. I would argue neutral to up, but I'm going to say Preston Zachman is a guy that I've read more and more about. Clearly had a really good camp. He understands there's a lot of competition back there. Obviously, Wooler is our guy, and then there's discussion about Brown and Latu, and then Zachman comes in the fold, and Braden Moore's been playing. But there's just different people. But I think Zachman he's so consistent. He's a senior this year. The guy just works so hard. He doesn't seem to take any plays off. He's just a very reliable safety that I think I think he's gonna have a really strong year. I've said that a couple times on this show and on Locked On. I just think that I like Zachman. I love his motor. I love his work ethic out there. And you put a guy like him next to Wooler, that's a very, very impressive safety group, even if you're not talking about Brown and Latu, which you can. But I think Zachman's really that guy that I like at that second safety position. I've always been a big fan of his, and I'm stock up because we've heard some really good things about Preston Zachman.
See, I'm all for Brown at that position. I think Zachman's a nice depth piece, but I think that athletically, Brown's just the best athlete. That he might be the best athlete out there. Period. I think you can make the argument that Wooler's a better football player. But I think from a pure athleticism and speed standpoint, I think Brown might be the guy there. It might be Braden Moore too.
Yep.
Like those guys are freak athletes. But I think Brown gives you something in terms of speed and versatility back there that we just don't really have in anybody else other than maybe Moore getting his feet wet. That said, I think the group is strong overall. There's a lot of depth there. There's nobody that's a pushover. Zachman, the only real thing, I didn't see him have any issues yesterday. The only time I've ever been hard on him was there seemed to be some communication issues last year that I caught with him where there was clearly there were busted coverages that he was involved in. Whether they were his fault or not, I don't know. But him and one of the other guys were not on the same page with who was supposed to pick up coverage. And that led to a couple busted plays early in the season last year. So if that's been figured out, I think that he's not a liability back there. Like, let's put it this way. Our safeties are so far ahead athletically compared to where we were with some of our previous groups where we'd have guys that were running 4.8s. There's no 4.8 guys. We're running 4.6 or better guys at safety this year. And that's a significant upgrade in terms of athleticism on the back end.
A really good point. Tyler Strieber says, if Latu wraps up this year, I love our safeties. Tim follows it up. What seems like Latu went from the second safety to the fourth. That's good. Yeah, I'm going to remind you all that Latu had a horrific missed tackle percentage last year, but Zachman did not. Zachman had a good one. Of course, Wooler's was like 7%. Zachman's was 9%. Latu's was 25%. So that's something that we have to tackle better. Mm-hmm. But overall, I mean, it looks like the stock's pretty much up on the defense. Let's go to the offensive side of the ball. We'll start with the most obvious one. Kick it off here, Justin Forrest, quarterback. We talked a little bit about it on Locked On Badgers last night. If you talked about it, this is one of the ones we talked about. Tyler Van Dyke, how you feeling about this? And I guess the position in general.
I think he'll be fine. In my view on him has not really changed from what I expect him to be. Like I said, there's going to be games where he makes some mistakes. The question is going to be, can you mitigate that and limited against the teams that it's more likely to affect you. Like if we can have him play really well against the few games where we can't afford to have him to make a mistake, that'll make a huge difference for us. I don't necessarily worry about him throwing a pick against, say, Rutgers or Purdue or whoever, because I think that we can make up for that against some of those teams. We have more room for error. So if he can be smart with his decision making, he did have one bad ball that I watched that I flat out said, but watching both of them, he takes more chances. He believes in his arm a little bit more than Locke does. Is pretty clear. But there's times where I'll sit there with the internal clock with Locke watching him and be like, that's got to come out. Like I'm waiting for him to throw the football. I'm like, we're 5 seconds in, you're dead. Like you've been hit already. And it's like, that's one of the things that you can't really replicate in camp as much. And it's like, if you're going to throw it away, you basically have to be like 3.5. And it's got to be like, boom, this has got to go. I got to throw it away. If you're not seeing it, it's got to be gone.
Did you see him run the ball much?
I did not see him. I did see TVD make a couple of Van Dyke make a couple of runs. He can move.
I meant Van Dyke. That's what I wanted to hear about.
Yes, he cooked Wooler on one.
Oh, nice.
Wooler came in hard on an RPO and he pulled it out and took off, and Hunter was sucked in and was just done. Like he ended up getting like 15 yards on it.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, I'm very neutral on this. I said this last night. I'll say it again. I just think that I expected there to be some growing pains. I expected there to be some difficulties early on. I'm happy that later on in the camp at Platteville, we've seen multiple comments about, hey, he's figuring it out. He's growing with the offense. I think we've also seen some deep balls now connected, which is nice. I hope that tonight in the scrimmage, there was some good deep balls. I'm curious to hear more about that. I didn't read anything from Nick yet. We'll have to talk to Ryan and see what he saw. But yeah, I mean, I think that I'm neutral. I'm not really stock up, stock down. I feel like this is okay. Ultimately, this is going to make or break the season, is what Tyler Van Dyke does. I do like that he's adding the running into the game, which was a comment on Twitter. I didn't pull it up. I didn't get it set up. But someone had asked me and you and Ryan about, he wasn't really a running quarterback at Miami, but I think that's part of the Longo system. I think that's one of the things that they identified when they brought him in. All right,
he wants quarterbacks to be a threat.
Absolutely. And listen, it was a big threat for us from Mordecai last year. We loved the use of his legs. He got us out of third down situations quite a bit. And we're going to need that again from Tyler Van Dyke. You got a comment up here from Brandon Knoble.
Yeah, I think it's Noble. I'm not totally sure.
Could be Noble. Yeah, probably is.
Mabry starts next year. Locke doesn't have physical tools. I will say this: Mabry's got a long ways to go. Like he's very raw yet in terms of it, but he's also working with a third team. So it's really hard for me to review what we saw yesterday from him. He's not ready yet by a long shot. He's got steps to hopefully take over the course of the season here to prove that he's made a big jump going into spring next year. I don't think either guy has totally sold me on it. So I don't know how they'll feel. It could be a third transfer. And that to me is a little damning of the room if we can't do it. But the way I look at it is both these guys need growth. I think I like Van Dyke, but I don't think that he's a lights out starter. And I think that at some point here, you got to get somebody in the room that's going to be a stud.
Yeah, DJ Hungerford actually puts this up there. He says, I'm a bit worried about the future at quarterback. Is Locke the guy? Can Mabry take the job, or do we take another transfer? So you just mentioned the transfer thing. I feel like this is the last year we're going to do this, rent a QB for a year, because I do think the next season the team is Locke's. He came in last year. He had played admirably in his freshman season to do some work for us. He's obviously going to be backing up TVD this year. Hopefully he doesn't necessarily get in there because there's no injuries, but he could very well have to play somewhere this year. He's growing. He's learning. There was at least a tiny hinting of a quarterback battle. Probably really wasn't a QB battle with him and TVD, but I think Locke is hopefully going to continue to take leaps and earn that spot. And you got Mabry, then you got Little Locke coming in after that. I'm actually pretty comfortable with where we are at quarterback for the future. And I don't necessarily think, at least on paper right now, that we're going to go out and get another transfer after Van Dyke leaves.
Man, I don't know. I need to see some growth from these guys. Like there's a difference between what I saw from Van Dyke and what I saw from Locke. I just don't know. And I know they're saying, the coaching staff are saying the right things, that they think they're both capable. I I think Locke can play to a certain level of standard where he's not going to necessarily kill you. But I question whether he can go out there and have a plus game and win a game for you, where he goes out there and you need him to have like a 250 and a couple of scores game. Like, we need to see that type of consistency from him. He's got to prove that he can be a 65-70% completion guy first, and then also be able to make a couple plays here and there where it's not a perfect situation. And I don't know. I didn't see that yesterday for him. Like, he between the two of them, he struggles with pressure more. He clearly is more uncomfortable with it. And I think part of that is because he's not as mobile as what Van Dyke is. And he doesn't have the arm that Van Dyke does, where Van Dyke will take some shots. But out of the two of them, anyone that's talking about Mabry, like I said, he's really hard to evaluate right now. Like, he's not playing with the twos. So anything, like, it's so disjointed watching his group out there compared to the others. The number twos and the ones are significantly crisper in everything.
As they should be. All right, let's move on to running back. I'll start with this one. Stock up for me. A lot of talk about the running backs. A lot of talk about how good the running game was. I'm going to highlight a guy that we haven't really talked about, and that's Jackson Aker. He's clearly looking to play. I mean, he's the guy that understands how tough this room is. Competition breeds, excellence, right? And I think that when you got Darian Dupree and you've got Dylan Jones in this room now, and you've got the top two guys in Malusi and Tawi Walker, Jackson Aker decided, he's like, listen, I'm gonna play almost every single day of practice. I read something good about Jackson Aker, and I give that guy a lot of credit for coming out here and realizing that you've got two freshmen that are likely going to surpass you at some point on the depth chart. Sounds like Dupree had a really good camp as well. I just think that it's really nice to see a guy that can come out here and just say, I'm going to try to hold on to my spot, and I'm going to try to solidify the third spot on the depth chart, because that is a packed running back room, but he deserves some credit for what he's done in camp.
I'm gonna set you a little straight on this. He's going to be our fullback. Is how he's going to be used. Like, he's going to be out there in split backfields, and he's most likely going to be used as a blocker. I'm not saying he's going to not run the football, because he probably will be used to run it a little bit here and there. But I think that he's going to be used mostly in short yardage situations as either a guy that they'll bleed out of the backfield as a receiver threat, or a lead blocker, or occasionally as the battery ram guy that they put in there. But they had quite a few.
He's going to be on the field.
Him and Tywee in the backfield together. And it's like, he's going to be the guy that leads Tywee through the hole.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I'm still proud of whether he does it the fullback or he gets carries, he's still going to be a guy he's making himself relevant on this team by the way
he has value for sure.
And I think that that's important, and it's something that I wanted to call out, because he's not the guy that we're going to talk about. Dupree and Jones, did you see them yesterday? What were your thoughts on anything that you saw from those two guys specifically?
I'm going to hit this comment here before we move on from Aker. Dark Ray, Aker isn't fast enough to be a running back. He is fast enough. I don't think he's nimble enough or shifty enough to do it, and that's the difference between him and the other guys, which is fine. Like, he's going to have a role with this team, and I think realistically, for all the people that have complained about us not using running backs the right way in short yardage situations, he's kind of part of the answer there. I think that he's going to be a guy that they use in some interesting ways to create kind of more of a power game in the short yardage situation. With regards to the other two guys, Dupree is just a dude. I saw him make a cut that sprung him for like a 15-yard gain when we were watching it. Every practice, he has at least one run where he just makes somebody look stupid. And he is by far the shiftiest back that they have. And he is an underrated power guy. Like, he does not give up when he gets hit. He continues to push, which is what you want to see from somebody early on. Like, he doesn't look overwhelmed by the physicality of it, and he's not afraid to run to contact. But he's going to force his way out there. I think he's a guy that is going to be the biggest problem in the backfield in terms of being able to make plays.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the one thing about this room is that it's packed. Right. And we haven't even brought up Gideon Atuka. Nate White has moved over to the wide receivers, it looks like. So, I mean, there's a lot of talent, and it looks like we're going to be good there. All right. Wide receiver, stock up, stock down.
We'll hit this real quick before we get it to Daltrey, James White 2.0. I think he's more of a Calhoun, like a bigger, more physical Calhoun. He's shifty in that regard, but I think he's got a little more physicality to him. Calhoun just had struggled to put on weight. and I don't think that's going to be an issue for Dupree. Wide receivers. I think I feel pretty good about the second guy. Like I said earlier that I thought that the group was pretty, like, it's going to be a good, not great Big Ten receiver room. And I stand by that comment. I think you have two guys that you're really comfortable with being playmakers for you in Pauling and Tretch. And then you have a bunch of other guys that I think that can provide value in Green. I think CJ Williams has taken a step and looks more consistent. I think that you're getting Anthony, who also can make some plays, has some good speed, and he's gotten quite a bit bigger. So they're in a decent spot at those spots, but I don't know if any of those guys are guys that I look at and I'm like, this guy's going to go out there and make plays against the better teams on our schedule, which is where we need to see them prove it. So they're kind of in prove it mode a little bit more yet, where we need to see them make plays. And I don't think that practice that we're at necessarily was going to provide those answers. I think we need to see them in live game situations where they go out there and do some things. One thing I will say, they did a lot of deep ball practice. There were a lot of drop passes from the wide receivers that I didn't love watching. Like that were balls that were there that guys just had to grab the ball. Like, you need to use your hands, you need to catch it.
I mean, we know this was a thing last year. We don't need to see that. For me, this is stock up, and there's two names I'll talk about. There's three, I guess. First of all, Tretch. Look, we all knew what we had in Tretch, and what I loved seeing from everyone that I was reading was, like TBD or lock hit Tretch wide open down the middle. Just, he's in space. He gets separation every single time this guy lines up. His route running clearly is fantastic. And it sounds like you were right, Justin. The guy's going to get over 40 catches this year. I think that's not a surprise to anybody based on what he's looking like. The other guy, two other guys I'll mention, Bryson Green. You know how I feel about this guy. I'm a huge Bryson Green fan. And he looks to have kind of really taken over. Like, look, I'm the top boundary guy. I need to be this guy. I'm going to be the dependable boundary receiver. There's other people as well, but he really has improved, taken a step, and I think is ready to become a leader with that group. And the other guy who we hear a lot about at camp, and I hope to see him potentially, be on the field more, is Chris Brooks, right? The guy's had another good camp. Last year had a good camp before his injury. So I feel like hopefully Brooks is a guy that gets talked about more. There was a question, actually. Tim says, if you were picking teams, would you pick Chris Brooks or CJ Williams? What do you think about that one, Justin?
I think I would take CJ Williams right now. I think he's more refined, and there's tons of injury concerns with Brooks at this point. Watching the two of them run routes, neither of them is ultra crisp. Like, they've run like bigger guys. They're not as smooth as some of the other guys on the roster, and that includes Green. They're probably the two that I was talking about when we were watching it during practice, and I go to Ryan. Those two are kind of herky-jerky in their movements. Like, they look like their upper body is like kind of moving back and forth when they're getting ready to make a break. And you see the smaller guys like Pauling and Tretch and KBJ that just look so smooth when they're coming into their cuts. And it's like those guys look like they're setting up. I think they both can do some things. Brooks is very physical. I think that there's some opportunity for him there, but he doesn't have a lot of speed. Like, I watched him during practice, and I'm like, so he's not going to burn anybody with speed. He's going to have to be physical and just kind of work his way and create separation via his just physicality. I think CJ has a little bit more, but even he doesn't run away from people. So he's going to have to be really crisp with his route running. He's going to have to be a guy who uses his hands. And that, to me, is the inconsistency with the hands with CJ previously. He's got to prove that he was one of the guys that had a drop during the deep ball drill, but he also had a really nice catch during it. So I need to see him be more consistent.
Couple of quick comments here. Badger and Bournemouth fan, love this take. If we cannot throw downfield again, we're not beating the better team. That's just a fact. We have to be better down the field. We can't have a compressed field like that.
Well, hear me out on this. We don't need to be hitting 40-yard hits, though. It's got to be where they're going to make the difference on that is you need to be consistent in the 10 to 20-yard range. That'll keep the defensive back because they can't come up if you're hitting plays in that range.
You are going to be a lot more consistent at the 10 to 20 yard range, though. If you can open up the 40 yarder, you're going to be more effective.
But you're not going to hit 5 40-yard passes in a game.
Agreed. It just needs to be a threat. It wasn't even a threat last year. Like, that's what I'm saying. We have to be able to complete some of those so that we establish the threat. Otherwise, we're going to struggle.
And they'll get their share of them. It's just it's the area where it's going to be the biggest difference for them is if they can consistently be somewhat accurate in the 10 to 20 range. Defenses will be afraid to come up on them because the run after catch in that range is going to be a problem, especially with guys like Pauling and Tretch, where they can turn a 15-yard catch into a 40-yard catch because you let them loose in space. Both of them can make people miss and pick up extra yardage.
You started this comment. How has Quincy looked in camp?
I started. Quincy's been dinged up. He hasn't played much, and that's a big part of the reason why we're not hearing anything about him. I'm still very high on him. But he's got to get on the field and he's got to make plays. But he's got all the talent in the world. Like, he's one of those guys that's just raw, needs to get reps out there and make some plays.
All right, Justin, tight end. How you feeling about tight end from pre-camp to post-camp?
The further we get into this, I would say I'm down on it a little bit. I was hoping that some of the guys would take the reins a little bit more. I think the guy there this year is going to be Ashcraft, because I think he has the most versatility, and I think he's the guy that they trust most with blocking, which means that they're most likely to use him regularly over the other guys. I don't know how much tight end is going to be used this year in general. I think they really there's some things that they're going to like doing with the 4 wide sets. And unless somebody's going to require some help, which will probably be against teams like Oregon and Alabama, they may require keeping a tight end in to help with blocking. But we'll see if they can go 4 wide and get away with it. I think they're going to do it because I think that they really like having those 2 slot guys that are going to be a problem.
Yeah, I'm also stocked down. I wanted to hear more from Jackson McGowan. At this point, I wanted to hear that he was taking over the reins a little bit, or that Ashcraft had a big jump, which doesn't appear that he's had a big jump, but hopefully he has a more
He's made progress. He's definitely more consistent than he was last year.
Mr. Rocktober says, if the tight end room is as shallow weak as it appears, lots of double slot coming. We know the double. Justin loves the double slot. Tawi especially sounds able to make up the blocking pickups that cover up the weakness. Yeah, when you see Pauling and Tretch on the field together, it's going to be fun. That's going to be a fun formation that I think we all expect to see a good amount this year. I know you definitely expect to see it, Justin, and you want it.
It's going to be a problem. It's going to be very difficult to handle them from a coverage standpoint because I don't think you can play them man very often. And I think even in zone, I think both of them are smart enough players that they're going to sit down in the weak spots in the zone and pick you apart. Yeah.
All right. So offensive line. I'll start on this one. I'm stock up on this. I think they clearly have had a good camp. Running has been really strong. The running game in general is something that is really focused. And that's obviously a lot to do with the offensive line. The name I wrote down is Kevin Haywood. Look, I think we talked about the starters a lot. The starters are looking good. They should be okay. Kevin Haywood is going to play this year as a freshman in the 2 deep, left or right tackle. He's been getting some reps at right tackle. And offensive linemen often can't really play as a freshman. And I'm not saying he's going to be great or he's not going to struggle, but I do appreciate the fact that we're going to have potentially, we're going to have other guys too, potentially freshmen that are going to be getting out there and building into the 2 deep. Now, we know that depth is a problem for O-line, but I will give these guys credit. They sound like they've done really well. Kevin Haywood clearly has made gains physically with Brady Collins. And so that's someone I'm obviously very excited to see. And hopefully we don't have to see him a ton because we have 2 starting tackles that are good. But if he is out there, hopefully with what we've seen, he can actually make an impact on this team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my thoughts on this are my grade is a split grade with it. And I would say stock is up on the starters.
Fair.
I feel like they've really come together. My stock is down a little on the depth overall. The second team guys, it was one of the concerns watching practice that I'm like, I don't know how many of these guys I trust going into play. They had Mandela at right tackle, and I think he just watching him more, the more I see him, he just seems more natural on the interior, and he's a guy that isn't used to doing a lot of pass sets. So if he has to get pressed into playing, I'm a little uncomfortable with that because he's going to get chewed up by anybody that's talent, like experienced on the edge.
Yeah. overall, I think a pretty good camp. We've both said stock up to a lot of things, so that's nice to see because you kind of worry sometimes when these guys actually play together, and we hear reports of journalists that are there, and you seeing the live practice. You kind of worry that maybe it was all hype and they weren't really playing well together, and you didn't see guys show out. Now it's very hard to evaluate when our ones play against our ones on the other side, and how our offense is going to do against other defenses, Big Ten defenses like the one we're going to preview here in a few minutes. Penn State, that's a heck of a defense. So it'll be difficult to see. It'll be interesting to see how that's going to go. All right, so let's talk about a couple things related to this as well. Did anything that you've seen or read change your depth chart perceptions, all your predictions for who's going to start on the depth? Any changes that you see coming?
Not for me personally, I don't think. There's nobody that I saw flash that heavily that I was like, wow, that guy, he's forcing their hand. If anything, I came away feeling very vindicated in the stretch that he's going to probably be our second best receiver this year. And I feel like that's likely the case. Like he gets open whenever he wants to find a slot. And if we get to see him in a scramble drill, it's going to be just lights out for whoever's covering him, because that guy knows how to get open. He knows how to make you make a misstep and find space. I feel pretty much, and I wanted to go back to, you said, we were stock up on this. I think that you and I were pretty even keeled on a lot of what we were expecting from this team. People thought we were a little up on it. And I'm like, no, I don't think that any of these position groups that I'm looking at and saying this is going to be a dominant group. I will now say that the offensive line has a chance to be a very good offensive line this year if things come together the way I expect them to. And that's a big deal for this team if they have that, because that's gonna take some pressure off of Van Dyke this year. If the offensive line is good and they can run the football, he's going to be in a lot of good situations to throw the football, which will make a huge difference rather than being third and long.
Yeah. Question here from Mike Wood. I do want to ask you this as well. He says, will Jamel Howard get any playing time this year? How did he look in camp? Did you see him yesterday?
I saw him, and no, he will not be playing this year. Based off of what I saw from him, I'm a little leery of whether we're going to see Howard ever see the light of day.
That's too bad. We were really excited
to see it happen, and we'll see what happens with Whitlow on him now. But physically, he's got a lot of work to do. We were talking about some of the guys, like Brandon Lane looks good for a big boy. He's a legit 315, and he looks like a legit 315 that's well put together. Howard doesn't look well put together right now. He looks, I don't want to talk down, but he's got to reshape his body.
Yeah.
To get to where they want.
Fair enough.
We saw Benton, how good Benton looked at 315.
I mean,
got to be good weight.
Yeah, no, for sure. Definitely. For me on the depth chart question, I think the only one that I see, I think Brandon Lane's going to be getting a lot more playing time than we probably expected him previously to get. So that's really the only thing. Otherwise, I think there's still a lot of discussion about the boundary wide receiver, the second one other than Green. Is it Anthony? Who is really going to be the guy to take over? It looks like it's probably still going to be Anthony. Okay, so any floor and ceiling changes to this team? Are you more do you feel like the floor has dropped a little bit? The ceiling got higher? I think you were at 6-6 and 10-2, I think, are your floor and ceiling, if I'm not mistaken.
I think that's probably
based on what you're seeing? Are you good with that?
I feel really good about the depth on this team. There's a lot of positions that I feel good about. If we lose somebody, it's not going to be the end of the world. Now, offensive line is obviously the caveat to that, because I'm not sure that we necessarily have the bodies there to withstand loss of several starters and still be a high-level offensive line. Well, there's going to be a lot of piecing things together with duct tape if that happens. But other than that, I feel pretty good. I think the defensive line actually looked fairly consistent. They weren't really getting gashed or anything like that when I watched them. I think the linebackers have a fair amount of depth. I think corners I feel pretty good about. And that's really what it comes down to. Does the defense look like it can withstand losses? And I think for the most part, yeah, I feel pretty good about if somebody goes down, I don't think we're going to fall off a cliff and have somebody out there that we're like, this guy should not be on the field.
All right, so we're going to get to A couple of quick, we had a great conversation with Ryan Herrings on Friday night, Locked on Badgers show. So I'm going to refine the parameters a little bit. We're going to do a scenario. I do have one question I want to bring up first, though, from Tim, which I think is interesting. He says, rank the outside linebackers in terms of pass rush, third and long. Justin, what do you think? Give me your top 3 guys that you think are going to have the biggest impact on a third and long situation with our pass rush.
Pius, Anelu, and probably Lowry.
Anelu getting number 2 there. Okay.
He has some athleticism to him that I think some of the other guys don't quite have his level of burst. I'm very high on him. I think that he's going to be a guy by the end of the season that's going to be having some reps. I just think that he's a gifted player and he's got a very high motor.
Love to hear it. I would say Pius, Lowry, Peterson are probably the 3. That's how I would rank them as far as pass rush. All right, so this is a more big picture question. Before we get into Penn State, I'm gonna give you a couple scenarios, and we talked about this a little bit. I want to go into more detail because the question is about being a program that has sustained success versus being a program that has flashes in the pan of success, and which do you prefer? So scenario A. And those of you listening, we've got 140 of you listening live. Thank you for that. And please put in your answers if you're listening live. If you're listening to this later, put your answers in the comments. I'm very curious to see what people think about this. So scenario A, 10 years basically of a 9 to 10 win team. Very, very successful, similar to what we've been for, frankly, quite a while. You have some opportunities to make the playoffs because we would have made the playoffs, in a few years, in the last 10 or 15. Maybe you get into the playoffs once or twice, but you never get to the national title game. You're not a national title, seriously real contender. You're not making it to that game. That's option 1. Option 2 is you've got a team that actually can and does make it to the national title game, not necessarily guaranteeing a win, but you're making it to that game, let's say 2 years in a row. And you have a couple more years that you're pretty good, but then you kind of tail off. So you have 2 years where you've got really good national title contenders. You're in the game, but then you have like 5 or 6 years where things fall off and you're a 3-4 win team. Are you taking option 1 where you have sustained success, but you're not really ever going to be in that game? Or are you going to take being in that game, but if it's going to cost you, let's just for the hypothetical situation, it's going to cost you to where you're not going to make bowl games for a few years. You're going to be a team near the bottom of the Big Ten. Which are you taking, Justin?
I think I'm still taking the latter. And I think the reason is because I want the opportunity. We talked about this before coming in, and there's nothing that makes me angrier than going into games with big teams and just knowing that we're not going to win. I want to have hope. I want to feel like when we play somebody that's good, that we have a chance to take them down. I want to relive the 2010 Ohio State game again and feel like that's something that can happen more than once. Because right now, the way I feel about this team is that we will beat up on all the kind of mediocre to good teams. But anytime we play somebody that's legitimately great, we can't compete. And I hate feeling like we're just not good enough and that everyone looks at us like the little brother that they're patting on the head. And it's like, you're a nice little program. Like it feels. That's how it feels.
Anyone's doing that with a 10-win team, though. A 9-10-win team.
They are. If you're Ohio State, if you're Michigan, if you're whoever else, they're looking at us and they're going, "Yeah, you guys are all right. You're not good enough, but you're okay."
Man, give me option 1. I want the 9 or 10-win team that doesn't win a national title, but if it means that we're going to be that good and consistent, have a shots at getting into the playoff every year, the idea of being, and we've never really had it. Since I've been a fan, the idea of being a 3-win team, the idea of having a record like Minnesota has had, or Illinois, or Indiana, or Purdue, or all these basement Big Ten teams, I want nothing to do with that. If you give me 2 national title games, I still would take the 9 to 10 win every year because I do not want to experience my team having 3 to 4 wins for any kind of sustained number of years. That will crush me on the inside. Because I want to be excited every game. I want to know that we can beat those teams that we should beat, that we have chances to beat the big teams. And maybe we do, maybe we don't sometimes, but I am never going to be okay with being a 3 or 4 win team, even if it means that because of that, but we got a chance at the title. We were in that game. Like, I don't want that. I want that sustained success that I can be excited every single year. And I said this on Friday with Ryan and you. The bowl streak means a lot to me. I'm proud of that bowl streak. I know that people can just get in winning 6 games, but we haven't been a 5 or 6 win team. We've always been 7, 8, 9, 10. And that's important. That means that you are one of the most consistent programs in college football. You're winning every single year. You're being able to beat the bad teams. You're never in the basement of your conference. And that means something to me. I want option A all day.
All right. Well, Badger Bournemouth here. We were better than Michigan for 20 years. The pushback I'll have on that is I don't want to be better than an 8-win Michigan team. I want to be better than an 11-win Michigan team and be the team that took them down. Because what gets said when Wisconsin beats an 8-win Michigan team? Well, Michigan wasn't good anyways this year. It gets discounted because they weren't in top form. I want to take these teams down when they're at their top of their game. If we're going to beat an Alabama team, I want to beat an Alabama team when they're a 10 to 11 win team. I don't want to beat them when the wheels came off and they somehow end up being a 7-win or 8-win team, because everybody's just going to discount that and say, well, they weren't good this year. They took a step back. And so the win gets kind of, negated by the fact that nobody views it as that big of an accomplishment.
I hear you. And you have some people that agree with you for sure. Badger Bournemouth says 9 to 10 wins with a shot at the playoff every year. Matchy says option B. Even if we win 9 to 10 each year, the nation's perception is still that we are harmless. Agree with Justin. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. It's a cool discussion. We talked about it a little bit the other night. And I like the sustained success, and it's important to me. Justin, any other comments before we move on to Penn State?
I don't think
camp
so.
or any other notes do you have? Anything you want to cover from camp at all?
No, I think we should probably move on to this game. We don't have a lot of time left. Not to drag this out, guys, but yeah, we're already 50 minutes in and we haven't even started talking Penn State here at all.
We enjoy our camp discussion. All right, so we are skipping ahead to Penn State. That's my fault. I just clearly didn't look at the schedule. We are going to talk about Penn State today. Reminder, October 26th, we are going to be in Madison, myself, Justin, Ryan Herrings. Can't wait to be up there. Nick Osen's going to be there with us watching it. So it'll be a lot of fun. It's Halloween weekend. So now of course, head coach James Franklin, right? Penn State, great team, obviously has consistently beaten us. They have a new offensive coordinator, an offensive coordinator that Justin surely must like because he came from Kansas, Andy Kotelnicki. Quarterback Drew Aller last year had over 2,600 yards, 25 touchdowns, 2 picks, and only really had 5 sort of turnover-worthy plays, according to Pro Football Focus. Only a completion percentage of 60%. Okay, passing as far as big downs was really not huge. Julian Fleming is a transfer wide receiver that's going to be there this year. They averaged 36.2 points per game last year. They did lose some key offensive line starters in Fashanu and Wallace. They did add Nolan Rucci. And they've got 2 really good running backs in Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. Defensively, quickly, they were number 1 in the nation last year in sacks and tackles for loss. They're 2 big edge rushers, Abdul Carter, who's moving over to defensive line, and Danny Dennis Sutton, and a couple transfer cornerbacks from Alabama and Georgia, Jalen Kimber, A.J. Harris. They did bring in some good players. Defensively, Justin, I don't think we really can question Penn State's success. They are an extremely good defensive team. Other than Michigan, they pretty much were the top defense in the country last year. They did lose some people, but they also brought in some people, and they've got enough there. Offensively, you and I sort of disagree on where we are with Drew Aller. I think he's a good quarterback that will probably have a good year this year. Some people think they're going to take a step back. Some people don't really like Drew. He hasn't performed amazing. I mean, 60% is really not that great. Where are you on Penn State as far as kind of how this team looks? And are you high on them? Are you kind of low on them? What are you feeling?
I look at this. I think they're going to be good this year. I look at this game where the area that I struggle with the way people are talking about Penn State is they keep talking up their offensive line like it's a great offensive line. It's just not. They've been mediocre on the offensive line for a long time. And a dominant offensive line with the type of talent they have in the backfield, those guys should be over 6 yards a carry. And they're just not. And they haven't been even back when they had Saquon Barkley. Like he was like a 5.8 type of guy or a 5.6 type of guy. And it's like, you're talking about him as one of the most transcendent running backs in Big Ten history, and the stats don't back that up. I think that they're a team that what you want to do is get them behind the 8 ball and make them have to throw downfield. And I think that Alar is a kind of a check down master right now. He's not a guy that I think you take a lot of shots down the field with. And that's got to get better for them if they want to. Like they talk about him losing to the better teams that they've played. I think that's a big part of it. I think they got the Wisconsin treatment more or less last year. They wanted to rely heavily on running the football. And what happens is they end up getting against a defense that's really good and starts to sit on the routes that are short. And he's not comfortable with taking shots downfield and making them play honest. That's got to change. Their offense is going to be a problem for, I think, the Big Ten for at least the first couple of years here, where people get used to it because there is a lot of deception involved in it. And it's triple option with the spread mixed into it. It's going to cause some issues. I watched that offense, and I've never seen so many receivers running wide open where you're like, why is there nobody covering this guy? I've never seen so many running backs where there's a gaping hole. And Kansas was not loaded with talent. Like, they were a very well-disciplined team that had some good players, some guys that will probably get picked in the draft, but aren't going to be top-level guys. They're kind of like Wisconsin in the last few years, as opposed to where we are when we're at our peak. And the way that offense looks when they have guys that are kind of like B-list guys rather than A-list guys is phenomenal. Like, I've seen them carve up good teams when they get into the flow of things. I'm curious to see if he can do that at Penn State. I'm curious to see if Franklin can keep his hands off of it, because that's something that I wonder how much he's going to get his hand in the cookie jar a little bit with the offensive coordinators and how he dictates it. We've seen it at like Minnesota where PJ Fleck can't stay away from it. I think there's a little bit of that with Franklin at times at Penn State.
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions has always been Franklin. Dark Ray says Penn State is just better than us at every facet. It's hard to see us winning.
Their offensive line is not better than ours. I will shout that from the top of the mountain.
I can hear that. I can hear that argument. And I think for me, Penn State, it's about the defense. And when I hear like our defense, I think is solid, and we're gonna give them some problems, but they're probably still gonna be able to move the ball a little bit on us. I don't know how well we're gonna be able to move the ball on them. And I think luckily it's later in the season. It's the end of October. So I feel like hopefully by then, Tyler Van Dyke has figured it out and we're kind of operating on all cylinders, and it will make us better in that moment, because I still think this is a really big opportunity for us to get a win at Camp Randall. But they've got a lot of good players, and that defense is very, very tough to move the ball in. And we struggled last year against top defenses. I mean, look at us against like Iowa. We need to be able to move the ball against Penn State, and it's not going to be an easy game. Do I think we can beat Penn State? I do, but I mean, they've got a lot of good players, Justin. They are, in my opinion, they are still a very good team that frankly, every time we played them in the past like 5-6 years, we shoot ourselves in the foot. It's close, but we don't win. We can't seem to beat this team.
So what I will say is the last time we played Penn State, we should have won that game based off of the fact that our offense was the one actually moving the ball in that game. What we had was a quarterback that shot himself in the foot a bunch of times and tripped over his own feet, fumbling the ball when we were going in the score. We had basically everything that we lost that game more than Penn State took it from us. That was a really good Penn State defense in that game too. I think it's so hard to compare because it's different now with this offense. We've never faced them with this offense. I'm curious to see how it plays against them. It's going to be really interesting to see how our offensive line does against them and how our running game does with them spread out a little bit more against us and not be able to stack in the box. That might be a blessing for us. It might be a negative. Like if we can spread them out and force some of their guys away from the line of scrimmage where we can run the football a little bit, it might give us some some holes that we can actually do some things that we struggle with them in the past. Because we both know that Paul Chris would run whether there's 8 or 9 in the box or not. He just was too stubborn not to. And I think that that's where this is a little bit different. They're going to take what's there, and we just need to execute. If they're going to sit with 8 guys in the box, we're going to throw the football. They've got to find guys that can get open.
Execution is absolutely going to be key in this game because that defense, bottom line, that defense is good. A few more comments here. Mr. October says, PSU, 2 words, vanilla. We get a W. We get a W that night. Zach Bart says, Drew Aller feels like a new version Christian Hackenberg. Penn State will be a good team, but I just don't trust James Franklin in a big game. Coming to Madison, likely at night, isn't a walk in the park. Yeah, I mean, Badger Borma says we dominated Penn State in 2021. Dark Gray says Penn State can compete with Ohio State and Michigan. We can't. I mean, I really hear Dark Gray's takes on this. I think that I'm concerned. Okay, this is one of those games. I think the 3 hardest games we have this year on paper are Alabama, Oregon, and Penn State. They are all at home. But I think this is going to be a very difficult game. I'm excited about it. I'm excited about maybe getting over that hump and finally beating Penn State. But they just concern me. I just think that this team is really good. And I'm hoping that you're right about the quarterback. You have been very vocal that you don't really believe in Drew Aller. And he's mostly in a lot of boards, a lot of things you're seeing. He's like the third, fourth best quarterback in the league. A lot of people are kind of putting him there, sometimes 3, sometimes even higher. But no, definitely not higher than 3. But I think he could be really good, and I'm hoping that you're right because you have said many times that you don't think he's good. He did have a 60% completion percentage, but Justin, he also threw 25 touchdowns and 2 picks.
It's not that he's not good. It's that he's not a quarterback that I look at and say that this is a guy that can go out there and win you the game. Like, he's going to take the plays that are there, and if it's not – like, Wisconsin, I think, is going to have a top 20 defense this year. And if they have a top 20 defense, they can absolutely hold him down. I don't know what they've done against anybody that was out like in that last year. I'm sure he was not good against it. I think the pass rush is going to be better this year. And if that's the case, I think they can get home on him and they can get him rattled. And that's where you're looking for. And that honestly is where the difference is going to be. When people talk about him last year, how poorly he played against Ohio State and them, they could get him rattled because they could get on him. Now the question is can you grow on that? Because not every quarterback ever gets better with the pressure stuff. The ball starts to sail. They're maybe not as accurate as they were. Their feet get a little happy. I saw it in camp yesterday with both guys from our side. Like, I don't feel great about either one of them. If we get a team against a dominant defense that starts coming downhill on them, where our offensive line doesn't hold up, we're going to be in trouble because I don't think either one of those guys are going to be able to make plays in that situation. They're not that type of runner. And I don't think Alar is either. Like, he's not a guy that's going to be taking off, running from the pocket, grabbing 40 or 50 yards a game where he can't throw.
If we can find a way to get our pass rush really looking good by then and get some pressure on him, make him, question some things. He does have a 60% completion percentage. That can be worse in that game if we can get some pressure on him. I like this from Tyler Strieber. This is exactly how I feel. I just hate Penn State because I don't feel like they're that much better than us, but we always find a way to blow games against them. That's so true. I mean, we were absolutely in that last game. We should have won it. And there's been a couple times you can look back 3, 4, 5 years and find games where we're like, how did we not beat Penn State? And it drives me up the wall. Dark Gray says Penn State put up over 30 against Iowa last year and we laid an egg. Dark Gray's clearly on the we're not going to beat them.
Iowa's vaunted 3-and-out offense gave them plenty of opportunities to grab 30 points. They were horrific in that game offensively. And because of that, they constantly kept giving the ball back to Penn State with opportunity to score. Yeah. Like, when you're not afraid of the other team's offense at all, you can take some risks with your offense.
And very few teams were ever afraid of Iowa's offense. I will point out, Mr. October points out as well, Penn State comes up a bye before coming to Madison. Let me just kind of walk you through their schedule really quickly. There are 3 non-conference games at West Virginia, Bowling Green, then a bye week, then Kent State. Their schedule, Justin, is really not that bad. They host Illinois and UCLA. They go to USC. They have a bye week. Then they come to Madison. Then they host Ohio State. So that's that stretch at USC, at Wisconsin, and Ohio State. Then they finish the year hosting Washington, at Purdue, at Minnesota, and Maryland. Our schedule is much tougher than theirs. They look like a team that's probably, I look at that schedule and I'm thinking, okay, their floor is probably 8 wins. But, a lot of people are predicting that maybe they fall back a little this year. I don't really see how their floor is lower than 8 based on that schedule. But
I don't think it is. I think that they're probably going to be at least a 9-win team this year. Yeah. So I think they'll be good. I just don't know how good they'll actually be, and if they're going to be a team that anyone's really afraid of at the top. I keep hearing from people that they're a definite playoff team, and I don't know if I necessarily see that with them. Like, Alar needs to prove that he can be a guy that can go out there and win those games. We saw what the playoff teams were last year. Every single one of them had a quarterback that would make big plays when they needed it to be done, and that's not him so far. And that's going to be what sets the bar for the teams that get in, because there's still going to be some eye tests going on with this for the people that are voting on it, that are going to look at it and be like, well, they're 9-3 or they're 10-2, but there's this other team that looks a lot more dynamic on offense, that if they get in there, they have a much better chance of actually getting hot and taking somebody out than Penn State.
It's going to be a good game. October 26th at Camp Randall Stadium. Definitely, if you're going to that game, we will obviously give out some information before we come up there, but meet us out, have some drinks with us. We would very much appreciate and love to meet and hang out with many of you, which we have before when we came out last year, which was great. We have 2 weeks pretty much left before the season starts. Well, almost, I guess a little more than 2 weeks. But next week, we're going to try to do some more Know Your Foes. We've got a few more teams we're going to get through. And then the weekend before, right? So I think that's probably our show on, the 25th or something like that. We're going to do a full season preview where you are going to get our final predictions for this season. We'll go game by game. Justin and I will break down what we think of each game, what our record's going to be. We'll do some fun over and unders. We'll get the community involved. So it'll be a lot of fun. Sorry for missing last week again. But Justin, final thoughts before we close the show.
Sure. Well, the last thing I'll say is, for those of you that are concerned about our QB situation, I beg you to go look at what happened with Iowa's open practice yesterday, where Cade McNamara was 7 of 21 for 20 yards, pick 6, and a fumbled snap. That'll make you feel better about anything that you've heard from Wisconsin. And they're talking about, well, our defense is possibly the best defense in the country. Listen, Iowa, you have a really good defense. You are not remotely the best defense in the country.
Cheers to that, by the way. Any numbers that look like that for Iowa sound perfectly great. I love hearing anything negative about our two rivals. With that, guys, thanks for joining us again on a Sunday evening. We will be back next week to talk about all things Wisconsin Badgers. And with that, on Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy the show, subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Bucky Report or The Bucky Report Podcast from wherever you get your content. Until next time, on Wisconsin.